Hello, hello. Today we're talking about, yes, the one that no one is supposed to talk about, politics. And so if you're not into that, definitely do not watch this video. But for those of us who are kind of interested in these topics, then, well, let's get into it. So the other night, like day before yesterday, I went to a Charlie Kirk event where he was speaking, and he's like a radio talk show host and or a podcast. Like he just talks a lot about freedom and teaching young adults. He goes to like college campuses and high school campuses and teaches them, about government, about limited government, how important that is, and just freedom in general, because we don't get taught any of those things in public school. So he was super, super, super amazing. Like how well spoken he was, and could, get the right words out and say things in the way he did. I was just like, wow. Like, I hope to be that, at least part of it someday. Because, yeah, when you see it in action, it's just amazing. But anyhow, I'll show you what he looks like. So this was Charlie Kirk. And okay, so first there was Patriot Barbie who was talking, and she's a conservative voice for women and for everyone really. And her story is super inspiring, how she stood up against Antifa and everyone who's trying to make her feel like she is a criminal for keeping her business open, even though, gambling places, where you do immoral acts like those things at night, those places were still kept open. Like all those places were kept open, but a hair salon and other places were deemed, you have to keep them shut. So she stood up against that. She's one of the first and only to do that. So that was super scary. Her story is so inspiring. And anyhow, I'll just share some of the main points from that event. And yeah, it's all just about, life, philosophy, politics, freedom, conservatism, explaining all those things. And it was really amazing. So one of the things she was talking about is like, let's see, how do we put this? How a lot of people are pushing the trans stuff nowadays, and on kids who they don't even have their fully developed mind yet. Like science shows that people don't even have their fully developed mind until they're 25. So like we can't be making these life-altering decisions, at least before we're 25, in my opinion, because if our brain isn't fully formed yet. And so she was explaining like how destructive it is, and to the person and to society in general. And I won't get into the reasons, but it was so powerful because, we're always either taught, yes, it's good, or no, it's bad, but never why. And I think the why is important. Anyhow, she was saying how no matter how much a man wants to be a woman or a woman wants to be a man, we can't, because we have our XX and XY chromosomes, which for like thousands of years from now or thousands of years before, we can dig someone up and tell if they were a man or a woman. It doesn't matter if they chopped certain parts of their body off or put chemicals in. Like we can't change the basic dynamics of life. And she was saying that there's 6,500 different or genetic differences between men and women. And she said men wanting to be women and women wanting to be men used to be a disorder. It used to be. Like, that was probably before my time because I didn't realize that. But and then she was saying, it was really funny. She was saying that, Charlie Kirk, he's such a handsome guy and everything. And she was like, but he sure would make an ugly woman, wouldn't he? And I just thought that was hilarious how she put it that way. Because just wearing high heels, makeup, and long hair doesn't automatically make someone a woman. Like being a woman is so much more than that. It's not just what some politicians in Washington say, that, that's all it is to be a woman. There's so much more. We're so much deeper than that. Like, I feel that's kind of an insult, that that's all it takes, you know? And so she was saying that women are what men cannot. So we don't have to be just like men, because we're already like so much different or even better, you know? So, and then she was making each gender feel appreciated for who they are instead of, you know, all the confusion going on. And that was pretty amazing. And she was saying, like, the men, that we need you, you know? And we do. Like, it is true. And then men need women. Like, we both need each other. And she was saying that women are told that they need to be more than just being in a family. And she's like, a woman, like, it's up to her to decide if she wants to pursue something more, or just be with her family and grow that, you know? Or there's different stages to a woman's life. You know, we feel fulfilled differently than men do. Men feel fulfilled when in their career and achieving. Women, we feel fulfilled in relationships and relating and nourishing and caregiving and being taken care of. There are so many differences. And when we try to be the other, you know, we really get sick inside. And then, okay. Anyhow, so her speech was really good. That was all the notes I had from her. And now the rest is from Charlie Kirk's, which is amazing. So he's saying to read the book, Man's Search for Meaning. And whoever wrote that, he wrote 2 books that I know of. And so to read both of them. So I want to definitely do that. And it's like on philosophy and all that stuff. And I love that. And then he was saying that for people who don't like Trump, ask them, well, can you name one virtue of the man? And if they can't, they're being completely illogical, because every single person has their good points too. You know, every single person isn't completely bad. The point that everyone has good sides and everyone has bad sides. It just matters what position they are in and the roles they need to play that are effective for that. So like, if I'm not gonna marry the guy, like, and he can run the country good, well, I'm voting for him to run the country good, not for me to marry him, so I don't care what his personal life is like. And think of everybody out there, like pretty much all the kids I know, or young adults, or older adults, they've been with like 10, 20, 60 people, you know, like in bed, and like all this stuff. And I'm like, well, you can't really be judging him for that when you've been doing the exact same thing, you know what I mean? And I'm not judging anyone if that is what you decided to do, like that's your choice. But you kind of have to be a little bit logical. And anyhow, and then he was saying that he's hoping that the people who are going against Trump in the 24 election drop off, you know, the other Republicans, because he's like, they're going to be run through the chainsaw, which is true, and have their entire careers like, you know, torn apart. And I mean, that is true. And so there's a quote he said, I didn't write down who wrote the quote, but it went, if you argue with reality, welcome to hell. And I thought that encapsulated that pretty good. And so then he was saying that, well, if someone says, I don't like Trump because he can't win, well, he already won. So, you know, that argument can't really go anywhere. And I know there's a lot of controversy about that, so I mean, this is my opinion, and everyone who has a mouth has an opinion, but, you know, there are also our stats and statistics and research and numbers, and yeah. So he was saying that one thing we need to do in Arizona is to, you know, work on, like, I don't know what word he used, like redoing or like fixing our Maricopa School Board. And then he was saying, so these are the things he was saying of what we need to do to help fix the country, to make it go in a better direction. And I know some people are like, oh, well, we should just give up. Like a lot of Christians are like that. They're like, oh, well, you know, it's just like the end, just give up. It's never going to get better. And it's like, okay, yeah, that is probably true. But who likes someone who gives up? You know, we're not supposed to just give up and just like lay on the ground dead, you know. Like, you have to keep fighting till the end. And so he was saying that one thing we need to do is overdo our Maricopa School Board. Then he's saying we should only have 1 day of voting, but he was like, that isn't really going to happen. So never mail in a ballot, because that's when they can screw the numbers up. And then he said the thing that he would suggest is to vote the day of the election. But we saw what they did in Arizona. Bill Gates and everyone was like, oh, you're going to all vote on the day of election? Well, wouldn't it be interesting if, the machines just didn't work? And that's what happened. They didn't work till like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There were like 3-hour-long lines, and lots of people didn't get to cast their vote. So, it would be ideal to vote the day of the election, but people make things happen. So he's saying to do at least, just a couple days before, because it's at least something. And then he's saying that Democrats sue 50 times the amount Republicans sue for the voting stuff. So he's saying we are making a mistake when we say the little things don't matter to our Attorney General. And then he was saying that for people who say, what's the point of voting? He's saying that's the wrong attitude, because that's giving the other side exactly what they want. That's a Democrat's dream, is for Republicans to just give up, or conservatives to just give up and stay home. Like when we think about it. See, that's why I love listening to him, because he was making all these arguments that I was like, how do you respond to these things? He's making them so logical and easy to understand. So anyway, what he was saying was, the Democrats' formula is that Republicans stay home, so don't. And then he was saying to look into Yuri Bezmenov. I think he was Russian. And he said to look into him and what he was saying. And he said, one of the things he said was, the most critical thing to turn a free country into a Marxist country is demoralization. And so we are living through a demoralization campaign right now. And if you don't see that, then you can't have your eyes closed, because it's everywhere. And he's saying that we all have an opportunity to do something. Like the day and age we live in, like we are the Esthers, we are the Davids of this age. And I thought that was really powerful. And he was saying that his favorite Bible verse is Psalm 97:10, that if you love God, you must hate evil. And so we must push back against evil, and that's one thing that we're not doing. We confuse love with accepting absolutely everything. So then he was talking about how do we change Arizona, or whatever country or state you live in. He was saying, number one, every decision you make matters. Whether you decide to go to Starbucks or not, or buy something from China or not, something made in China, or like who you vote for, even though it's just one vote. Like I've been told that it was just one vote that changed that we were going to speak English in this nation instead of German. I don't know if that's true or not, but I've heard that story. So one vote, it matters. So he said, you must do what is right, whether you think it will turn out in your favor or not. And that's the definition of duty, which is you do what's right, no matter what. And so someone came up asking the question that, I'm like, you can call me the average Joe. What can I do to help the country? And he's saying, well, first of all, I don't believe in anything average. I don't believe there's any such thing as the average guy, because we are all unique. We're all special. We all have gifts, and we can all do something and be brave and courageous. And I really liked how he said that. So he said, also get your spiritual disciplines right. Pray, fast, be a good person, to other people. Because a lot of times we're so mean to other people, especially our family, and that doesn't help, And then he's saying, get involved in the Republican Party. Even though he's saying that, even though I say I'm against the Republican Party because it's pretty much Rhino. But he was like, but it's a vessel, because we'll never get anywhere with a third party called Conservative Party. It'll be such a minority. So work through it because it's a vessel. And then he was saying to become a precinct committee man, because that is what will help change. Because we have to start at the local level, and that will influence the bigger picture, instead of just giving up because we're like, well, Washington, D.C. isn't listening to us, Another thing he was saying is volunteer as ballot chasers during election time. And then he was also saying to just do 30 minutes of activism a day. Because he was saying that imagine just falling 800 votes short of winning the election. And it was 800 votes in Arizona, or whatever state you live in, that was the cause that the other side won. He was like, let that sink in and let it fuel you to, help people see the light. And, and the arguments, not for the sake of arguing, but to help them, use their mind instead of just being spoon-fed what the social media and the news and everything that everyone watches just brainwashes them, And then, so this will probably offend some people, but I agreed with every single thing he was saying. Like, it's just like with some friends of mine that are, I wouldn't say religious because I hate the word religious, but like they take the, believing in God very seriously compared to anyone I know. They believe these things that he was saying, and I don't know anyone else who does. And then when he was saying it, I was like, wow, I've never heard it said from somebody else before. But anyhow, so let's just jump right into the notes. So he's saying that 95% of pastors didn't say anything about the reversal of Roe versus Wade. And he's saying that was nothing short of a miracle that had happened. And yet everyone was like, God, couldn't you have done better? So he's like, when people are like, where's the miracle? Where's God moving in our country? He's like, that was it. And 95% of pastors didn't even say anything about it. And then he was saying that, what to say when a pastor says, I only do the gospel? He was saying that, well, what does the gospel say about harming children? The stuff taught in schools is harming children, where boys at 14 years of age can chemically castrate themselves, when 5-year-olds can be like making all these decisions about their body, like all these teenagers who you're totally whacked out in your teenage years anyways, much less adding all of this to it, that you cannot reverse when you're older. He's like, what does the gospel say about that? Like, why are you keeping silent when all these things are happening out there? And so then he was saying, also asked the pastor, what is the gospel? Like, tell me, what is the gospel? And if he did know what it was, then ask him, why did Jesus quote Deuteronomy the most? And so did the founding fathers. He's saying that the pastors need to learn Deuteronomy, and we also should as well. Like, don't just leave it to the pastors. But like, we should learn Deuteronomy, and it's the one with all the laws, of the Old Testament. And so he's saying that learn them or get out of the ministry. He was saying that to the pastors. Like, either have them learn it or they shouldn't even be in it. And I was like, wow. And then he was saying what to say when a pastor says, oh, well, I don't do division. Charlie Kirk was saying, well, if you became a pastor, like, you didn't get in it to unite. You got in it to divide in the first place, So what's the point? And then he was saying what most people call division, I call clarification. Because most people say, oh, well, you're dividing men and women, by saying that they're different. He's like, no, I'm clarifying. To me, that's a clarification. That's not division, that's clarification. It's like something that's super scribbly and blurry, but then you put binoculars on and it becomes clear. Like, that's not division, that's clarification. And so he's saying the most important thing is to win souls for God. But the second most important thing is to have the ability to have the first. So we must be involved in, in politics in a sense, because if all the Christians or the religious people or good people stay silent, that's how bad wins. Like, isn't there the quote that bad runs rampant because good people do nothing? Like, I don't want to get to the end of my life and God being like, why did you do absolutely nothing and you could have done so much? Like, I do not want him to say that. So you're saying that pastors aren't speaking up because they are afraid. And I get it. Like, I feel the fear even just doing this, because I know this will probably have lots of backlash and all kinds of things. Like, it is super scary. I get it. And so another person asked, How do we keep Marxism out of churches and the school? So Charlie Kirk responded by saying, since where in the Bible does it say tolerance is a virtue? And he said, okay, then ask them, what's the Greek word for tolerance? And they said, there isn't one. That's the point. There isn't one because it isn't even there. The opposite is actually what is said. Being intolerant in a sense. See, we conflict love with accepting bad. And so you're saying that this woke pastor in Georgia brought like this trans person up on stage and said, this is the bravest person I know. It is so scary and brave and courageous to be able to do what he did to himself. And he was saying they're doing that because they think they have to be tolerant. But the love part is, tolerance is not love. Like, sure, you can accept people for how they are because you don't need to change every single person out there because most people don't want to change. So just accept it. But for things you can change, like we can't just be tolerant of things in our house or of people close to us because that isn't love. He's saying love, the proper thing to do is, I love you so much, I'm not going to allow you to be something and somebody you are not. You are on the path to self-destruction and the S word, like when people get rid of themselves. And that is the truth, So let's get to the root of it. That is what we should be saying to those people, showing them love, true love, not this tolerance thing that is leading them to kill themselves because no one is giving them any time, And this is such an important thing of love versus tolerance. And I know this is a really hard subject because a lot of Christians are intolerant. They come across super brash and highfalutin and nose down and like, I'm so much better than thee or whatever. And that, we should not be doing at all. Like, we're supposed to be so humble and the servants, like washing other people's feet, which is what the lowliest of the lowly slaves used to do back in Bible times, That is how we should be, not like this holier than thou attitude. So that is not being intolerant. The intolerance he's talking about is just to not accept evil and to love people so much we won't allow themselves to destroy themselves. So it's intolerant of the evil but loving of the person. And then he was saying that Marxism, what is it? Marxism is call everything racist until you control it. And I was like, wow, that is so powerful because that is what's happening in this country. And then Marxism is also take everyone's stuff and hate the rich, even though we want to be the rich. And he said Marxism is turning classes of people against each other. And that is so true. So another point he was making is that we must excommunicate the evil. He said most pastors, he's like, I'm surprised, but most pastors don't even know the Bible. And I was like, that is so true. And most people, regular people, don't even know it either. And it's like, well, if you call yourself Christian, you probably should, in a sense. And he said that pastors are afraid of speaking up because they'll lose people. And like, when has that ever been a criteria of just having the biggest church? Like, no, that's not what God wants. He wants a holy bride for himself. So, and then he was talking another subject of, which I don't remember the whole thing, I just have like this couple of notes, but it was so good. He was saying that if a person thinks the most important thing is themselves, that is the most miserable thing, and they will end up getting rid of themselves. He said the most basic fundamental thing we must know is that there is a God and we are not him. Now that is just like he put everything so simply, that we need to be able to explain to people. And they said that Marxism is a war on religion. He said, if you have a society that does not believe in God, you cannot have absolute truth. And that is so true. I remember when I was speech and debate and I did a card on absolute truth. And that was so hard because there's so many ideas out there on how to explain the topic and for me to understand it. But that was one of the most important things I've ever learned. Like, that was super powerful. He said you must be honest to believe in the necessity of God. Like, when we look into the world, like the nations that ended up killing, okay, I said the word, getting rid of their people and destroying and being so inhumane and evil, really. Like the USSR in the past, China, North Korea, Hitler, Mussolini, like those types. It's because they took God out of the equation, So, I mean, atheists can be moral people, it's just they cannot justify it. So he says, you must be honest to believe in the necessity of God. He said, we've never heard about the excess of secularism. Like, we hear about the excess of religion, and that is no fun. But he was saying, we've never heard about the excess of secularism, because what happens? China and the USSR. Like, yes, we can go too far in religion, but he's like, actually, we're going the total opposite way. Like, we don't even have to worry about being too far in religion, because we are on the complete opposite end. And I was like, yeah, that is so true. And he said, if you remove God, people try to find their meaning elsewhere, in government, or in the football star, or the actress, or the social media star. Like those are the gods of this age. Like in the past, like in Alaska, they would build totem poles. They would build idols for themselves, because like man has to worship something. And now this is what people are worshiping. So then he was explaining why we must have the Second Amendment, which is the right to have arms, firearms. And I thought this was really powerful because I never understood it before. He said because like the Democrats are so blatant and out there and they're on the offensive. And he's like, Republicans, we need to be doing the same instead of just being complete silent, He said most Republicans are afraid to go out and say why we have a Second Amendment. It's not for hunting. It's not for fun. It's not even for self-defense. And I was like, when I was hearing him say that, I was like, what? It's not even for self-defense? Because I didn't even know this myself. And he's saying it's for a free people to be able to defend against a tyrannical government. That's why we need to say that it's for that purpose. Because if we say it's just for target shooting, well then have a BB gun. Or if it's for self-defense, well then a shotgun will do, But no, it is for liberty. So we have decided the benefit of driving is worth the cost of thousands of people dying. It's the benefit versus cost. And so it's the same with guns. The Second Amendment protects all the others. There's no First Amendment before the Second. So that's why Hitler, when he first got in power, he took away all the guns. Like, do you think China would have gotten Hong Kong if everyone was out there with an M4 around their neck? Like, no. Because it actually keeps you from conflict. An armed society is a polite society. So he was saying that he wrote this book called The College Scam. And I was like, I really want to get that book. And he's saying another way to support him is just to subscribe to his podcast and keep him in our prayers. So that was the whole thing, the main points that I took. And I hope you guys enjoyed it or learned something. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.